the social media coordinator for Boston Women's Film Festival.
Yes. And we're here tonight Sarah and I are going to sort of chat about identifying features, which is really quite an impressive debut feature film from director Fernanda Valadez. And Sarah, I didn't know if I did a little research on like how they shot it, and
I did a little bit on my end as well.
Cool. So we're going to assume everyone who's watching this has already seen the film. So we're not going to do a synopsis, and we're not going to worry about spoilers. We're really going to just talk about the film. Feel free to ask questions, put them in the chat if you're viewing, and we will answer anything that comes through. So, I mean, I was surprised, and I guess it's because it's a feature film debut for the filmmaker. There's not a lot of biography to be found about the director or the primary actors.
Right.
They're experienced, you know, they work in the industry, but that's about what I could find out. There's not a lot of like historical research or like reviews or articles about any of them. Did you find anything, Sarah?
I did. Yeah, I found a few. I found one pretty big Variety article that they did an interview with Fernanda, and in there she talks about how she's the founder and like primary worker of 2 production companies and one thing that I just thought was really interesting about this film in particular, especially as her debut feature, is that she employed a crew of mostly female filmmakers. The DP was a woman, her co-writer was a woman.
The gaffer, the lead electrician, was a woman.
Yeah. So I thought that was huge. And you don't see that very often.
Yeah, very intentional.
Yeah, and I can only imagine what it must have felt like to be one of those women on that set and just like working together and like just looking around and seeing yourself in one another and just being a part of something that you know is like just changing the world.
I also found that the crew is tiny.
Yeah.
That like when it was at its largest, it was 20 people. And that partly was because they shot it all in Guanajuato.
Yeah, in her hometown.
Yeah, which is her hometown and the main character's home. And they just moved there for a year.
Yeah.
Shot it. So they used a really bare bones crew for most of the shooting, which I also thought was really interesting because it definitely didn't feel that way watching it. Like the cinematography, they did an incredible job of cheating to make it feel like a real road journey, a real epic travel film about a woman on a journey.
Yeah, and I read also that it's her home state is like one of the most dangerous, with like one of the highest rates of crime, and that she had to hire like a police crew to keep her crew safe.
Wow.
And I think that's just like super powerful, as especially like as a woman, knowing how scary it is to just, it's in America, knowing it's so scary to just like be out at night alone. And the fact that a lot of the film was shot at night, and it being a huge like and very dangerous place to be in general. And then she had a crew of mostly women working at night, during the day, and that's just huge, and it must have felt so personal as well.
Yeah, I wonder, it feels to me, I mean, I'm glad to hear she hired a security crew. I didn't find that, but like the only thing that I had been thinking was that the fact maybe they stuck together and by that potentially were safer. But I mean, one of the things I feel like the film really exposes is, to me as a United States viewer, is that the level of violence that is part of daily life, that is part of everyone's daily life, is pretty incomprehensible.
Yeah.
You know, I loved her choice to include a doctor, you know, a working surgeon basically, and also a mother. I mean, we talked about Proxima last night, and this is also a story about motherhood and
Right.
about family and like how do you keep family in situations like this? How do you recreate family? But that the section at the beginning with her and the other mother, I found really powerful. But partly because they were such, they were parts of such different elements of Mexican society, but experiencing exactly the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And I thought so too. The introduction of the character Miguel was like huge because from my perspective, I rarely see what it's like to be like a deportee.
Right.
And you know, like having to face that fact that okay, you've been living in this country, you've made it your home, and now you have to go back to where you don't want to be and where you don't have a home anymore. And
Right.
his story in particular, and I felt that his character was like a really interesting mirror to Magdalena.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, where when he was coming back, he made the decision to be like, okay, I have to come back home. So what's the next? What's my next move? I'm gonna find my mom, and she is just on in search of her son. And then they find each other, and it's like they see the people that they lost in each other, and then they
Mhm.
help each other move on from there. And I thought that that was so powerful, and it really showed like all the things that people do want to all the things that people are running away from or are trying to avoid in their life, and having to face that again when you're forced to go back to that country
Yeah.
and back to your home country is so heartbreaking. And the scene that I thought was just, oh my god, it just like blew my mind away was when you meet him first and he's coming back and he's crossing the border back into Mexico. The soundtrack in particular, the way it grows and then diminishes and then the sounds of his surroundings become higher, just
Hmm.
put me right there with him,
Hmm.
of like what he's going through and all the things that are going through his mind, of like the anxiety of having to go on a journey again and having to face that dangerous path, to go back to his town, and then the chance of whether or not he's going to find his mom, what he's going to have to face on the road there, and you just really feel him
Yeah.
when he's crossing that border.
Yeah,
And
I agree that the change in sound is a good depiction of what it feels like when you're walking in an area that you like, that's what your senses do in an area where you're in in danger or feel
yeah,
vulnerable, that you sort of have to open up broader, and so things are like bigger and louder, and it actually like makes it more intense, but also that's the only way you survive.
right, is when it's that fight or flight
Hmm.
response, when like you are at a heightened perception of your world and your surroundings, and you have to be, because you don't know what's coming up behind you and you don't know what's ahead of you most of the time. And for him, the part too when like he had to sell his shoes to the driver just to get him somewhere where he could be, where he would be, where he excuse me, where he would have a safer way to get there. He had to sell his shoes in order to do that.
Yeah.
It's there's levels to it.
Well, I mean, especially when you think about, I mean, it's not like, you know, the news moves so fast now. It's not one of the top stories, but it was,
Yeah.
you know, of this exact situation, and to really give images and and like an experiential moment to the facts that we've been told about people being forced to go home, like, and then they are just left, you know, like there's no, you know, reintegration assistance or let me make sure you get back to your home village or anything. It's just like, here's your bus ticket.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And one of the biggest things that I got from her interview that I read was that one of the biggest reasons why she made this film was for people to have an empathetic look on migrant life and what it's like to be an immigrant, either going to immigrating to a country or being deported from one.
Right.
It's a complete journey that people don't really have a look into. And the way that she portrayed these stories, and with especially with like motherhood at the forefront of it,
yeah,
I think made that empathetic push for people to understand how the gravity of the situation that these people are in.
And I mean, to get back to the other part of the film, the connected to the title, like identifying features, I knew walking into this movie it was not going to be fun, right? Like in some ways it was a much easier film to watch than I expected with that as the name, but then in other ways it ends up being even harder to watch because it's, I mean, one of the things that I really took away from it is it's not just migrate. It's not just about crossing the border. That's like everything is dangerous. You know, I mean, one of the things I tried, and I also really struggled getting data on this, but just to figure out what numbers we're dealing with of how many people disappear. It doesn't seem to be a well documented or tracked data.
Yeah, and you can see that in the film too, when like they don't have a lot of resources to help the people who have lost their children, who are looking for their children, and for the people who are the victims.
Right. Like there's no one helping them either, right?
Yeah. And then how hard it was for Magdalena to even find information on anything. She had to like hide in a bathroom, and someone had to like just like whisper to her through the stalls.
That scene was amazing.
Yeah.
And I thought that whole interaction was so perfect.
Yeah.
You know, of the sort of balance of private space and public space, and then like who's a customer, who's a worker. It sort of showed so many layers that people are trying to navigate at one moment. The only number I could find is that from January to July, because I guess one of the new leaders in Mexico is trying to address the issue of the disappeared. And it sounds like part of that, he's new as of 2018, and part of that is you have to figure out the numbers, right?
Right. So
from in January, they announced it had been 60,000 people since the beginning of it being documented.
Yeah.
And then in July, it was 72,000. So that means in the first 6 months of this year, somewhere between 11 and 12,000 people disappeared. Now they're not all Mexican. Like that's international people. I would assume predominant, like there's probably an over reporting of tourism disappearing and, you know, people visiting Mexico rather than citizens themselves.
Right.
I'm sure if I, you know, decided to make this a research project, I could probably find a think tank that's tracking it, but that's a big number.
A big number.
And this film made me understand how big the problem is, like that it's all of the things.
Yeah.
You know? And I like that it wasn't it's not about drug lords, and it's not about it is about their impact and the migratory impact on the society, but like it's about all of it being part of the society, and that like it's too big. It's
Yeah, like you said before, it's not just about immigrants. Like with, I forget her name, but the mother that she meets and helps her read the document, her son wasn't immigrating to America. He was just out driving with friends, and then he disappeared for 4 years, and then she comes back, finds out that he's been dead for 2 weeks. And
at the end of the movie, I was like, oh, now I know where he was.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, oof.
Yeah, and it's just it just shows you the danger that these people are in, and then the ones who don't have the resources to, you know, I guess separate themselves from the danger, have to move, and they have to do something about that and try their best to like keep their family safe and keep themselves safe, because Magdalena didn't want her son to go.
Right. Nor did the other mother.
Yeah. And
nor did the dad.
yeah, exactly. And it was the two sons that were like, we want a better lives for ourselves and for you, and I know we can achieve that by crossing this border and by getting jobs, and we have someone over there that can help us get jobs, so we're doing this for you and for us. And unfortunately, along the road, these things happen, and for them and thousands others. And it's that number really surprises me. Not because I'm surprised that that's happening, but because of she said, Fernanda, she said that one of the reasons why she was inspired to even write the story was that a report came out of 12 boys who disappeared. And so 12 to 70,000, that's a big jump. Like, that's a big jump.
I know. It's I mean, one of the things that I really appreciated about the film, and it's one of the reasons, and we do have a question from our viewers that I want to get to as well. But that it's one of the reasons I really love watching films, is that like I'm experiencing that it was a humanist film, you know, like it's dealing with a political issue and a cultural issue and all of these things that have data and documentation and, you know, bad characters and good characters. But what she focused on was how it affects people and families. Exactly. And like what the human experience is of the loss, the search, the lack of information, the finding out the answer, you know. And like this sort of goes to the question from the viewers. They said, what did you think of the ending and did it surprise you? It very much surprised me. I actually thought the film was going to be about a resolution, about a different family, you know, and like two people that have been hurt find each other and like recreate something new. But
for me,
that's not the truth, right? For the filmmaker, at least.
Exactly. Yeah. For me, I wasn't necessarily surprised as much as I was heartbroken. That's the reality of it. I wasn't expecting a happy ending by all means, like not at all. But to
me, that was the happiest it was going to be, and it was sort of like,
yeah, like he's alive. He's alive, but he can't come home.
Nope.
And he's in a situation where his life is threatened every single day. And the fact that he had to kill his best friend.
I really appreciated that epilogue of them actually then telling you his story of how this happened. I mean, so much happens in the last 15 minutes of the film that happened in my mind, and that's happening on screen as like the truth comes out. The violence sort of gets ripped into the moment, right? And then the cinematography is amazing with all this lighting stuff and, you know, barely being able to see people, but you learn so much after I mean, I'd given up on that. You know, I watch a lot of Middle Eastern film too, where like the journey is the point and that there is no answer. And so I sort of expected that to be where it went. I felt like I'd been hit across the side of the head about like, oh, but then there's this whole other thing.
Yeah. And like, it could be an entirely different movie.
Like, people are monsters. Like, you know, I started thinking about the psychology of these people and the whistles, like the whole whistle language that they have. They're clearly communicating with each other.
It's a hunter communication, and that's crazy that they're hunting people
for no reason.
No reason at all.
It was shocking. I mean, it made it really interesting at the end, because I was like, this was more of a mystery than I realized. We have another question, which is, what do you think the responsibility of media is to cover the issues at the border? I mean, that's not, I don't know the answer to. I mean, my feeling is it is their responsibility, but you know, I don't know that much about it. I don't know if you know more about like journalism and
like, I feel like the media's responsibility really just lies in truth and not being biased in what they say, because I know how hard it is to grab information from things and all of that. It's really hard to get access to certain things, and if you're not a person with a big name or money, like, you're not going to have that type of access to that information. But I think to the limited amount of information that we have and that is available to journalists, they need to be reporting the truth. as it's told, as it's given to you, not swayed in for politicization and for to favor a candidate or a political movement. I think it just unbiased journalism is the media's responsibility at this point, and especially with such a polarizing topic.
Yeah,
I think it's really easy to talk about immigrants in a bad light, and really easy to paint them as this one-dimensional type of people. And too often, that's the only type of media representation that they get. And that can be said the same for many marginalized groups across the board. So I think unbiased journalism is where it needs to be.
I mean, I feel like I've heard, I mean, it's also a challenge here because we're not going to hear a lot of Mexican news unless you listen to global news or can speak fluent Spanish and can actually listen to, because we're not close to that part of the country, right? So for people who live closer to Mexico, I think they get more information. But I mean, another example is for like a decade, I was hearing about the girls that were going missing in one specific area of Mexico, right on the border. And it was really a border thing. And you would just get these like tiny pieces of news about it, and not, it never became a topic. And I think that partly it's that it doesn't seem like a lot of the reality of what's happening in our both of our neighboring countries, but really specifically Mexico. I don't think a lot of the news gets out there of what's happening. You know, it's just like, there's violence, you know, there's a revolution happening over here. And then it's up to the consumer also to go down the rabbit hole and find the information. I mean, this film really inspired me to learn more, but I also gave images to the news that I'd been hearing in 2017, predominantly in 2017, about this challenge of the mistreatment that is being applied to undocumented and migrant workers, and the inhumanity of what we're doing to them. I mean, I personally have always been, I grew up at a time when the Berlin Wall coming down was like one of the biggest celebrations that ever happened, and that wall was such a sign of societal illness. So the fact that we have a wall is something that I am so ashamed of, and I can't believe how it's just quietly been built up. I also really loved the documentation in the film from Miguel's perspective of coming back into the country, and it's so dark. That is not when you see an American traveling into Mexico and back in a film, that is not what you're seeing, which is like 5 turnstiles and like just this corridor of metal where you can't go anywhere with like barbed wire at the top. I
mean, I already talked about it before, but it was so simple the way that I was filmed. Another thing that I read that she said about the way that she was filming is that she didn't do an excess of shots for each scene. Like, it was very simple in terms of just like the framing and like what shots she chose to include in the final edit. And I thought that simplicity spoke so much to the story, because it's really that simple. Like, I am a human and I am crossing a border, but it's this complicated. And it came across so well with all the other aspects that she put into the film, with this lighting, with the soundtrack, like I talked about before. Just the sound design was really beautiful and striking. And then just the choice of shots were very methodical. And the characters that she chose to include to paint this picture of beginning to end was just so poignant in like the actual journey that that goes through for someone who is completing that type of that migration.
Yeah. So we have another question, and I'm doing some research to try to help answer it right now, but I don't know if you know anything. It's asking, what can we do to fight for immigrant rights?
I think simplest is just awareness and research on your own.
Yeah.
Like bare minimum, I would say that would be number one to focus on, especially if you're not one, if you're, you know, kind of, you don't know which like organizations to donate to or like organizations to support. Like I think just doing your own research and having your own awareness is really important. And once you get that stepping stone, share the stories, tell your friends, tell your family. Like these people are humans. They're not evil people.
And they're not numbers.
Exactly.
Like, I've never believed they're evil people, but like I don't they're fed to us as numbers, as these
exactly.
They're dehumanized through, I mean, that's one of the challenges I feel like with the news coverage of this, is that it is very data driven, and it can be,
and that's all they throw at you. It's just the numbers.
Yeah.
These number of people died. These number of people are here.
Right.
These number of people are deported. Like, no.
But to answer their question, it does, I agree. I think that's the right answer, because I don't know enough to say this is a really good organization and this is not, but it does appear there's not a lack of immigration nonprofits and grassroots and advocacy organizations out there. Some of them are doing legal work in the US. Some of them are helping support families trying to find missing members of their family. So
I have one more thing to add.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, one more thing to add. If people, another thing that you could do as just a non-immigrant yourself is to not how do I put this? Just know that they're around you. That immigrants are around you. They're everywhere. They're serving you your coffee. They're bagging your groceries. They're cleaning your house. They're everywhere. You walked past a bunch of them today. I promise you.
100%.
I promise you. They're your doctors. They're the people who drive the bus. They're everywhere, working in every level of profession, either working class or super up there with a doctorate degree and 100K salary. Like they're everywhere. And like, you just have to open your eyes and open your mind to accept that that immigrants are not just this one image that you have that's been fed to you your entire life.
No, it's especially in a city like Boston, where there's a lot of imported human power that's intentionally imported, as well as a lot of communities that have been invited in. Going back to our conversation about For Love with Rutland, like there are a lot of cities who have invited in refugees, which are another kind of immigrant that's coming into the area. So I think that that's such a valuable point, and that there are so many different kinds of stories to that. So we're at 9 o'clock, so I didn't know if there was anything else that you wanted to hit on before we.
Was there another question?
That's no more questions right now.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, I did want to talk about how Fernanda mentioned how her film was kind of directed as a thriller. And I thought that was so fitting, especially for just an immigrant story in general, where especially like, and Magdalena's story, where, because that end goal of her finding out whether or not her son is alive or not is the ultimate thing that she's looking for. And when you're thinking about a thriller, it's that last 15 minutes that really like puts you high on gear. And the way she talked about making the cinematography and how it's like really quiet and not soft, but just like it and not slow either, because every moment really it has you on edge. But it just
not as fraught. That last 15 minutes are so fraught. The way they shoot it with the flashlight and like the pitch darkness, and they don't try to fill the light at all, and the, you know, I mean, you really get immersed in being hunted.
Yeah.
You know, not being able to see the people coming after you, and the shocking violence, because you haven't seen any actual, you've seen a lot of threat and a lot of anxiety, but you actually haven't, like, it also depicts the world of Mexican culture as not a malicious, dangerous place. You know, I mean, these characters are both doing very isolating, vulnerable things that could put them in a lot of danger, but nothing bad happens to them until the very end, and then
Yeah.
it's like da 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 da.
That last image too of it, the metaphor of the devil, it like killed me. It was the spear in my heart. Oh my gosh. And like I don't even know how to explain the feeling that like came over me when that last image just like sat there in front of me for so long. And oh my god, I had to, like, after I finished watching the film, I had to take like 10 minutes to just breathe.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, because I was thinking about Magdalena having to go back to her home and just have to live the rest of her life not knowing if her son's gonna come back, not knowing if he's gonna survive, and then also having to know that like she will never know unless he does show up at her front door years later.
And then who will he be? Like, he already is someone that he's not the person that left.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, one thing I wanted to end with was just a little information about how the film is being received, because clearly we loved it. Hopefully those of you who've watched it and are joining us in the etherverse that we have also enjoyed it. But it actually is getting incredible critical acclaim. It premiered at Sundance in January. And then now that there's sort of a festival season again starting this fall, it is playing all over the globe. Opening night of festivals. And you know, from New Zealand to Boston to the Houston Latino Film Festival, it's just getting a lot of acclaim, and it seems to be sort of a universal expectation that she is going to be a new voice. And I just hope it's true. I mean, one of the reasons we have this festival is because, you know, a lot of women make amazing first features, and getting to the second feature is actually incredibly challenging.
Very hard.
But I know I'm going to be keeping my eye out for her and the cinematographer for sure.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, like with her short film,
cinematographers.
Yes. With her short film 400 Maletas is essentially like a prequel to this story. And it was really critically acclaimed as well. It did really well, and I think like that's what pushed her career ahead to the point where she was able to make this film to the degree that she did. And I'm so happy that we brought it to our festival. Like when I watched the screener back in summer, I was thinking in the back of my head, if we don't get this movie, I'm gonna be sick. So I'm so happy it's in the program, and really people are, and the stories of immigrants are being viewed through a voice that is respecting their stories and giving them the screen time that they deserve, and just representing them in a way that's not like the stuff that we're used to.
Yeah, I agree.
Just the regular stereotypes and the
yeah. It's not just a big like gun movie. And I completely agree. For those of you who are interested, I also would recommend Antigone, which was our opening night film, but it is available throughout the entire festival, and it's a different perspective on the immigrant experience set in Montreal. It's an adaptation of the play. It's an incredibly powerful film that will talk about immigration from a different direction. And if you're looking for something that might be dealing with a different political topic, there's Coded Bias, which is a very hot documentary right now about coded bias in
artificial intelligence,
in interfaces that we're all dealing with in Zoom. So it's already, I mean, it's already a buzz everywhere because it's sort of exposing something really big, but I definitely recommend checking either of those out if you guys are looking for recommendations for other films to watch over the weekend. But everything on the film festival schedule is available through this Sunday, August 18th.
11:59 p.m.
Yeah, so there's lots of time, and the weather is going to be like perfect for watching a bunch of movies. So please join us for another film in the festival, and otherwise have a wonderful night.
Yeah, and just lastly, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook for news updates on a daily. All right, thank you all so much.